On this episode of Physically Spiritual, I talk with author Daniel Fitzpatrick. We discuss Sloth, the Sabbath, liturgy, family life, his novels, and his book, Restoring the Lord's Day. You can support the show by becoming a patron at physicallyspiritual.com. Follow me on Substack at becominggift.com. Get a copy of Daniel's book with the link in the show notes, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Daniel Fitzpatrick, welcome to Physically Spiritual.
Thanks so much, Andrew. It's great to be here.
So I start talking to every guest, really wanting to hear the way the Lord brought about what they're doing in the story of their life. You know, reading Restoring the Lord's Day, I couldn't help but just reflect on the depth of your reflections. And it just struck me that it was probably something you were thinking about a lot prior to writing this book. So I'm just curious, like, what did the Lord do in your life to bring you to write this deep reflection on restoring the Sabbath?
It's been a long time coming. I think the roots of the book really go back into my early childhood and growing up in New Orleans, which is a place that approaches time a lot differently from many other places. The most obvious example being the fact that we still have very big Mardi Gras celebrations that go on for weeks. And so there's a real feel that time passes differently here than it does in other places. So like I remember the first time I was in Dallas for Mardi Gras, because I went to the University of Dallas. It was just so sad, just being like, this is just a Tuesday and no one is celebrating. And it's just a miserable February Dallas day, rather than what I had experienced for all of my life, which is, this is a moment to celebrate. We're about to journey into the desert. Let's provision ourselves by rejoicing for a moment before we go into that. And when I left New Orleans, I had this sense that for a lot of people, every day is pretty much like any other. You go to work, you come home, you go to the gym, you come home, you go to mass, you come home. It's always 72 degrees wherever you go. And it's just the same thing over and over again, this sort of grinding everydayness. That was so different from what I experienced growing up. I also experienced a lot of really beautiful churches as a child and had a sense that Sunday was this moment for beauty. And as I went and lived in other places and did other things, I had the sense that for many people, and often for myself, Sunday too was starting to just look like any other day. Very little distinguishable from the rest of the week. And so I had this sense that that was not right. I also had a sense from early childhood of sort of creeping anxiety arising on Sunday as I looked ahead to what was going on Monday and the rest of the school week. And as a child, I couldn't have articulated this, but I had a sense even then that this too was not how things should be. That if Sunday was, in fact, this moment of encounter with Christ when he was giving himself to me bodily in the Eucharist, if it was this day when I encounter him and experience a taste of heaven in some way, then why was it very often the day when I felt the most anxious? So all that was kind of in the background as I went to the University of Dallas, studied philosophy and literature there, and started reading a lot about many different things, of course, but really spent a lot of time my senior year with the sin of sloth. And very often finding it in these kind of odd ways connected with Sunday. And that all just sort of formed the basis for many years of just thinking about, okay, why has Sunday observance changed so much in recent years? Why has it so declined in our culture to the point that I think most people don't even recognize that it's an issue? And if it is the fact that it has declined, then what is it about our culture that has led to that? Are there some particular currents in our culture that have led to this scenario? From there, what can we do to better it? And first of all, how can I celebrate Sunday better?
When I picked up the book, I have to admit I was pleasantly surprised in that I was expecting one of two things. I was expecting either like a very political approach in a bad sense of like we just need to like change the laws or kind of become activists for Sunday. Or the other thing I was expecting was maybe like tips and tricks,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, like turn off your phone and get out your gratitude list or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and, and as I picked it up, you kind of primed me for it in the intro to the book, but there was in hearing about your background, it makes sense. There's something about it. It was like somewhere between like the Divine Comedy and academic theology. Like there's a readability to the book of a kind of literary sense, but then there is also a depth of almost like an academic article.
Mm,
And you kind
mhm.
of captured both to make it both pleasant, but also deep and rich. I have to admit, there's a couple times I had to look up the word you use. That's taking me back to my GRE studies. So that was good too. Um, yeah. So you take it head on and you don't shy away from kind of digging right in, I think, to getting to a lot of the root cause of what's happening. And that connection with sloth that you mentioned, or acedia, and with that, I couldn't help but reflect on like the apparent contrariness or contradictoriness. Like a lot of people think of
Mhm.
like Sunday, I'm supposed to rest, right? And that just means I lay
Yes.
on the couch and watch Netflix.
Right.
um, but that's not really what we're supposed to do on Sunday. Um, so, what is the understanding of sloth that you've come to based on your research? And then, how does that paint a picture of how we really do enter into rest in a true sense?
We tend to kind of think of sloth as just laziness. So you would think, yeah, like sloth is my friend on Sunday, right? Surely sloth would be something that could really come to my aid and just kicking back and relaxing and not doing anything. Um, and so I was really struck by a couple of things in my reading kind of early on in this process. The one being the descriptions that we find in authors like John Cassian and Evagrius Ponticus when they discuss the way that sloth afflicts or afflicted desert monks in the early centuries of monasticism, and also some things that St. Thomas says about sloth. But when we look at these accounts from the lives of the monks, we find all these really curious things, like someone a monk who is afflicted by sloth will do all these things like, wander around the monastery looking for somebody to chat with for a while. He'll go outside and just kind of watch the sun and long for it to go down and for another day to begin. He'll start to dream up distant monasteries with better leadership and better food and more beautiful art and all these things that could really help him to succeed in the spiritual life. He'll even take up lots of work and do all sorts of charitable acts in order to distract himself from the regular routine of his monastic life. And reading that account as an undergraduate, I felt like I was reading an account of what was going on in my own heart a lot of the time. Because I would think of, all the ways that like if I have an essay due, I'm going to clean my room instead, right? I have to have a clean room before I can get down to this important work before me. If I am feeling dejected about my spirituality, I'll think about, if I was in this parish where it's really beautiful and the pastor preaches really well and there's just really good holy people everywhere around, then I'll be holy instead of in the concrete circumstances that I find myself in, somehow using those as a means to grasp the holiness that God intends for me. So all of that was very striking to me. Seeing that sloth is not just this laziness, which it can kind of start off as this kind of physical weariness that leads to me not really wanting to do anything. But sloth is something that becomes much more active, something that actually tends to heap more and more activity upon us to keep us from doing the things that God wants us to do and to keep us from just being quiet before God so that we can hear his voice. The other thing I found really striking was that in St. Thomas's discussion of sloth in the Summa, I mean, he says a number of really interesting things. I mean, basically, he says that sloth is sorrow over spiritual good. Which, I think, if we take it to the limit of that, we could really basically say that sloth is ultimately sorrow about heaven. In the kind of extreme form, right? Sloth in the end makes me feel sad about being with God, which of course is part of why St. Thomas goes on to say that sloth is a special sin against the commandment to keep holy the Sabbath. because it is precisely a sin that causes us to reject resting in God's will. It makes us not want to just sort of give ourselves to um, God's providential offering of himself to us, which so often manifests itself in my job, my family, the particular people I interact with every day, the particular little tasks that are part of my work to do every day. And sloth makes me reject those things. And in the end, like it keeps making me reject higher and higher things as I seek this kind of fantasy holiness for myself.
I can't help but sort of reflect on my own life and how sloth often is a bit schizophrenic. Like we have little kids
Yes.
at home, and in the evening before going to bed after we maybe finally get our kids going to sleep, if God willing it actually does happen before I fall asleep. Um, there's nothing I would rather do anything but do the dishes, right?
Yeah.
But in the morning when I wake up and I have some time to myself, which is kind of a little Sabbath every day, when I sit down and I have time to pray, there's actually nothing I'd rather do than do the dishes.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and how there's this way I'm pulled, you know, just to not want you might like maybe the sacrament of the present moment or just
Hmm.
whatever God has given me in that time in my duty in life. Um, so that makes me wonder, uh, that Sabbath rest isn't just a negative of like, we're going to close our shop on Sunday or we're not going to work on Sunday, but Sabbath rest is actually a filling Sunday with something.
Yeah.
Um, so, so what are those things that we're being called to fill the Sabbath with that sloth is putting up barriers to or creating friction in our heart to getting to?
I like to think of it in terms of Exodus in a lot of ways. That it's easy, I think, to think of Exodus in this kind of negative sense of we're fleeing enslavement to Pharaoh, which of course is part of the process. Um, but that's not really what we're doing, right? It's not just that we're fleeing Pharaoh; it's that we're going to God. And so when we depart from that slavery, I mean, where do we go? We go to Sinai. We encounter God there. And what does God do for us? He gives us um, all the instructions for how to worship Him properly, right? And that, of course, is where I think where a lot of people get kind of bored with Exodus. Like, yeah, like this is how you build the ark, and this is how all the vestments are going to be made, and that, and you kind of fall asleep there. But that's kind of what it's about, right? Is that this is what God wants us to do, and that I think is kind of the key to understanding Sunday is that, yeah, as you say, it's not just a day for not working or not pursuing, all the things that make up life one way or another. It's a day for giving ourselves wholly to God, and of course, that the kind of supreme moment of that is Mass. But the church gives us so much more and invites us to do so much more and be so much more with respect to Mass, right? So Sunday Mass, right, ought to be this kind of pinnacle moment that then overflows into all the rest of the week and invites us back to itself the following week. So that we engage more and more with that Sunday Mass through everything else we're doing. So whether it is, on Saturday, uh, reading the Sunday Mass readings ahead of time, reflecting on them, engaging in the great commentary tradition that we have down through the ages on the scriptures so we can engage our minds and hearts with uh, the words that God wants to share with us. Whether it is, starting to take up liturgy of the hours some way or another, the rosary, doing all the things that throughout the week help us to live always in the Lord's Day and to always enjoy the resurrection. I mean, one way I kind of like to think about it is in terms of football. So the NFL has done a really great job in training people how to live always in game day. All right. So Sunday, of course, is game day, but you also have, college football on Saturday, high school football on Friday, NFL games on Thursday and Monday, to the point that, the NFL and football more generally is giving us opportunities to engage all throughout the week, right? And of course, we can watch ESPN, and we can look up stats on our phones and all these things that allow us to kind of constantly turn to the game and be engaged with the game in one way or another. And of course, I think the way that we as a culture give ourselves to something like that speaks to the great desire we have for constant engagement with God. We've just sort of forgotten that the church has offered us this means of constant engagement um, from the beginning, and that we have that richness available to us. We've lost the savor of it. We no longer know kind of the taste for those delights, and so we turn to lower ones in our search for something good.
I love that football image. It's like you got fantasy football too, so you can act like you love your own
Yes,
team. And then now with
right.
gambling, it's like we can even pay it alms and like put
Indeed,
our hopes and
indeed.
dreams into getting wealth out of the idol too. So it's I think it's an apt analogy. Um, i- in the book, you dig into in depth liturgy, silence, prayer, family life, and feasting.
Mhm,
I guess we're kind of like the themes that I identified going through it. Um, and and as I've been meditating on that, it just struck me how much we've lost all five of these in our society,
mhm,
at large, but even in our church to some extent. Kind of the hollowing out of the liturgy that's happened, and maybe a misapplication of the Second Vatican Council, how we just live
mhm.
lives of constant noise and distraction and, music and, podcasts, maybe not this one, but maybe this one too. So if you're not supposed to be listening to this, go pray or go be with your family. Prayer obviously is gone. Family life is so destroyed, and we really don't know how to feast, right? We just know how to like gorge ourselves every day.
Yes.
Because there's no fasting anymore. You can't feast if there's no fast.
Mhm,
Um, yeah. So, uh, just thinking of pulling out maybe some of the themes that, as you've been trying to apply this in your own life,
mhm.
in your own family, in the book, you reflect deeply on all of these topics. So go get the book. There's a link to it in the show notes for Sophia Institute Press. But just as you've been trying to live this Sabbath in your own family, like what are some of these reflections that have most profoundly impacted your family?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, family is so key to all of it, right? That
Hmm.
so much of the Lord's Day has to do with learning anew to be present to God, who's always present to us. And so the family itself is so key to raising up children with a knowledge of how to be present to God, precisely because they've had the experience of parents who are present to them and
Hmm.
to whom they can be present as well. And I think that's one of the just the saddest and sort of gravest challenges that faces us right now is that, for one, so many families are so broken and so divided that it's just a huge barrier to coming to know the Father. If we have so much trouble knowing our own fathers and mothers, but even in families that are together, um, there are immense barriers right now. Like, I mean, my smartphone, right, can be an enormous barrier to my being present to my children, because playing with my kids, right, takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus, and sometimes at the end of the day or the end of the week, the slothful part of me wants to just waste time and not engage in the people around me. So we have all these challenges to actually just being present to one another as a kind of extension of the presence of the Father to us, right? Which is what we're preparing for, right? In some sense, the whole point of life is preparing for the eternal presence of the Father. And so if we have so little experience of being present to each other in life, I think that's a really big barrier to learning to be present to the Father. Um, the ways that we deal with space and time in ordinary life really contribute to that, I think. So I mentioned the smartphone, which makes it really easy for me to be anywhere but where I am. It's all I have to do is unlock my phone to suddenly be in Ukraine or Gaza or wherever else in the world my attention might go. Um, there are lots of things that pull me out of the present moment as well in time, right? A lot of anxieties having to do with, this or that bill that's coming up, or this election cycle, or whatever else it might be that's drawing me out of the present moment into the past or the future in an anxious way, right? Rather than in a kind of contemplative way. Um, all these things, I think the liturgy is such an antidote to, right? The liturgy when it's well done, and when we have things like good architecture and good sacred art and good sacred music. All those things kind of train us in our approach to space and time anew, right? Like a beautiful, well-constructed church directs my attention to certain places, right? It leads my eyes to the altar, leads my eyes to the crucifix, it leads my eyes to the tabernacle. Um, Good liturgical music like puts me in the present moment while stretching me out in time and training me how to sort of gather up time in one contemplative moment, in this way that kind of prepares me for something like the experience of the cross, right? When Christ kind of draws up all time in his suffering and offers it to the Father. Um, yeah, the liturgy, right, provides so many of the answers. But as you say, right, we've kind of lost a lot of our awareness of how to celebrate mass well, and I think that's kind of on all fronts, right? We have a lot of ugly churches, we have a lot of bad music, we have a lot of distracted people, we have a lot of weaknesses, um, but at the same time, of course, in the midst of all that, Christ remains there, right? All we need to do is turn to Him and ask His help. He is eager to aid us, right? Is always there, right? Offering himself. Um, so a retraining of attention is key, right? The liturgy and the family are places where that can really happen.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate it in the book. You take a hard look at the liturgy, and it's a challenge, to think of it. I work um, for the pastoral center in our diocese, and just the hard realities of many parishes. It's like if you get rid of the people doing music, maybe there's no one else to do music.
Yes,
um,
right,
but
right.
then at the one point in your chapter, though, you say, but there's nothing more distracting than somebody else's eyes looking at
Yeah.
you. So
Hmm.
like how yes, there's all these things that might be a little bit out of our control, or maybe in our control if we can come alongside and offer our service to the pastor to make these things more beautiful. Um, but if we're distracted in mass and looking around, we're going to be more distracting than any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
appreciated that
There's
reflexive turn in the chapter.
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like those desert monks once again, right? Where within the context of the mass, right? I kind of have my work cut out for me, right?
Mhm.
My job is to be there and pay attention. I give my mind and heart to God. And it's very tempting to be that monk who, just wants to go wander around and, look, what's going on over there, or, who's that talking behind me, and can I get in on their conversation somehow? And all these distractions that present themselves. Um, Whereas if we're just there and attend, right, and just practice being present to God, who is there present to me, that can be transformative, not just for me, but then for other people around me, right? Who seeing me are sort of guided by my attention back to Christ.
Yeah, when you're talking about family in the book, you talk about the transcendentals as a pattern of family life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the concepts that I've explored some is I've sort of thought of integrating health and holiness and mental health, physical health. And there's just a lot of complexity to living a good life. One of the concepts I've thought of a lot is I call them the macronutrients of the soul, like playing on
Mm.
that idea of
Uh-huh.
macronutrients and nutrition, and calling the transcendentals the macronutrients of the soul,
Oh,
sort of
nice.
defining them as like, these are the things we need to take into ourselves to flourish, to thrive, versus the approach of like, this is all the stuff you shouldn't do. right?
Yes.
So when you start talking about that, the transcendentals as a pattern of family life, I really connected with that. So as you conceptualize that, like, what does that even mean? The transcendentals as a pattern of family life?
I mean, if we think about so the transcendental, so unity, goodness, truth, oftentimes beauty, right? Sometimes, like St. Thomas will describe beauty as like a radiant, special radiance of the good.
Hmm.
Um, but all of these things, right, kind of, I think, are naturally a part of family life. So, like, family is founded on unity in difference, right? So for a family to exist in the first place, right, two people have to come together and make a union of themselves, right? Offer themselves to each other in this union sanctified by God, who then blesses the couple, hopefully with being a kind of image of the Trinity, right?
Hmm.
Which is this great uh, sameness in difference, right? The three persons of the Trinity giving themselves to each other in perfect union. So the very shape of the family, right, of father, mother, and child, images the Trinitarian unity in the world, right? And as a child, you kind of have this experience of, I'm somehow one with these people who who I find myself among, and it's from that kind of relationship with them that I'm then able to go off into the world and be my own person and have a kind of personal unity that stems from the oneness that I originally experienced in the family. We kind of see that with the reciprocal gaze of Adam and Eve in the beginning too, right? That it's only by seeing himself in Eve that Adam is finally given back to himself, right? He's finally made whole in seeing this other. So we get that kind of oneness. In these relationships with each other, also, we learn to do what's good. This is kind of the basic moral training that we get as family members is learning to do good things for and with one another. We learn as children also important how important the truth is, right? We learn that the we learn the importance of an authentic correspondence between what we say and what in fact is out there in reality, um, and how that has very very real consequences on day to day life. And hopefully, within a family, we learn something about beauty as well, right? Hopefully, we are exposed to the kind of radiant goodness of God in the world, right? Whether that's through the experience of nature, right? Through the experience of art, um, through any of the kind of like modes of education through which the family ultimately leads each individual into the encounter with God.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it just reminds me of Pope St. John Paul II's simple line, family, be what you are,
Yes.
uh, and how it's just simply being a family, and but actually living it, right?
Yeah.
In all of its difficulty, but all of its rich simplicity too. Um, all right. So if you haven't yet, the link in the show notes, get a copy of Restoring the Lord's Day. Great reflection. You will not be disappointed by the depth, but also the enjoyability of the read. But you also have a new novel, First Make Mad. This is what I love is you've written a few fiction books, and you also
Mhm.
have some of these theological reflections too. So First Make Mad. Could you tell us about this?
First, the title. So it comes from Longfellow, right? So it's a line from one of his poems: "Whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad."
Hmm.
Um, so in many ways, the book is a kind of reflection on family life, especially I think really the process of becoming a Christian family is one of setting oneself in conflict with the forces of the world. And so I think in many ways, being a Christian family means you're going to come into conflict with the gods, right? Obviously, not the one true God, but gods in the sense of the gods of the pagans are demons. So to set up a family is to sort of declare war against the false gods who attempt to overwhelm us. So yeah, I mean the book is it sort of takes place over the course of one day. It's one Ash Wednesday. It follows a butcher in a small town in Arkansas, essentially as he sort of tries to navigate how do we maintain intimacy and holiness within the family in the midst of kind of the busyness of modern life and all that that entails, and how do you maintain Catholic faith in the midst of um, a culture that's at least at sort of at best in tension with that faith and is sometimes downright hostile to it.
I I love the power of story, the power
Mhm.
of imagination and how story, that narrative mode really, I mean, our nervous system experiences what we're reading in a real way through the narrative running through the brain, and how powerful that is. Like I think of C.S. Lewis's book, um, oh gosh, That Hideous Strength,
Yes.
and how in the introduction he talks about it really being kind of a literary version of his essay.
Mhm.
Oh gosh, it's like the end of the week, so I'm not remembering anything right now. Oh, but yeah, just how, in the story, it's like you learn, uh, you know, philosophy. You learn so much
Yes.
about the nature of reality and the power of story to form the mind. I have to ask, you work full time, like the writing's not your full time job yet.
Right.
Maybe someday. I think it's coming around the corner here for
God
you.
willing.
You have a family, you have kids. Like,
Mhm.
when on earth do you have time to write all these books?
Over the years, it has become a matter of seizing odd moments as they come. Um, yeah, I used to. So some people are very good about just having a very strict routine. You know, writing at a certain time each day. I used to be kind of like that when I was younger, but what I found as we had more kids and we have four now, if I try to set myself a strict schedule, it invariably ends in frustration. Because if I tell myself I'm going to wake up at 4 every morning and that's what I'm going to write, well, that of course is when kids will wake up. And so it's become a much more fluid sort of process of just trying to take free moments when they come. And a lot of times I don't want to do it. I don't want to write as much as I love writing, but when the moments come, I'm often just like, I would rather just sit here. I'd rather just read a lot of times, but just taking those moments when they arrive. Sometimes my phone can be a great aid in this. So I end up doing quite a bit of writing on my phone, um, just because it allows me to, if I have a few minutes where I'm, waiting for a child to finish using the bathroom or something, I can stand outside the door and pull out my phone and type a few words and then go back to whatever I have to do. But it's a fluid process, one requiring constant prayer for sure.
That's good. That brings us full circle back to the idea of sloth
Indeed.
and
Yes.
combating. So, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on Physically Spiritual. I appreciate the book. I appreciate reflection. I appreciate your time. If you haven't, like I said, if you haven't gotten the book, go down to the show notes, Sophia Institute Press, to get a copy of Restoring the Lord's Day. I'll also link all your other books down there for people to get a hold of.
Thanks,
So,
Andrew.
any closing words you want to share with us?
I mean, just the last thing that I often like to say is because people always wonder, okay, what can I do on Sunday? It's kind of always people's practical, let's get down to brass tacks question. And what I find really encouraging is from Jesus' words in John chapter 5, verse 17, when he's being questioned about one of his Sabbath healings. And his response is, basically, from the beginning until now, my Father is at work and I am at work as well.
Hmm.
And I find those words very helpful and just very comforting as someone who is sort of increasingly busy, just sort of, constantly working one way or another. Because even on Sunday, of course, diapers need to be changed and meals need to be cooked and all these things need to happen as they do on other days. But if I can ask myself, uh, am I in whatever I'm doing working alongside the Father? That is, am I helping to restore order? Am I giving life? Am I healing? That can be a really useful, just sort of quick examination of conscience, whether it's on Sunday or any other day of the week. But I think those words should give great comfort to all of us. First of all, just as words of encouragement in helping us to do the work that God asks of us on a daily basis in the concrete circumstances in our lives, but also just to know that that now that Jesus spoke of was not just in the year 30 in Palestine, but that now is the now of God's heaven, and that Christ is at work now, healing and giving order and working to give each of us new life.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew. This is great.
Thanks for joining me on Physically Spiritual. If you want to support the show, you can become a patron on the Apostle app by going to physicallyspiritual.com. You can follow me on Substack at becominggift.com. I've been your host, Andrew Reinhart. God bless everyone.